talked about a grouting sponge. It has a texture on one side and it's a sponge on the other, which is great because I can wet this easily with this side, and this side is almost like a light sandpaper. Look how easy it comes off. And that's why I wasn't concerned about overspray, because all I have to do is wipe this off, which I had to do anyway. I don't want to have dust on my walls. I want my walls clean before I paint them. So I'm going to wipe this off, and it's going to take me 10 minutes to wipe all the walls down, and we'll be ready to paint. Before I start rolling it, I like to cut in. Now, when I buy a paintbrush, I always look for a good one. I never buy a cheap paintbrush, because you'll have nothing but problems. A cheap paintbrush, the bristles are going to come out and they're going to stick on your wall. You're going to be picking bristles off, and also the brush will be too stiff and it won't flow with the paint. It's going to leave streaks. So get a good paintbrush. When I'm done with a paintbrush, I clean it off real good. So I always buy a wire brush. I take this wire brush in the sink or outside by the hose, and I'll make sure to get all the paint out of this edge right here. If paint happens to get up in here, it stays in there and it can ruin your brush. And you make sure you clean it off real good. You take this and you just wire it off real good. I use this brush all the time and it's spotless. I make sure I keep it clean. After I'm finished, I put it back in the original case. This one's getting a little bit ratty. My brush isn't, but my package is. This is an angle sash. I like to use a 3-inch angle sash brush because this will cover a good bit and you have a good point to cut in. Now I like to cut in right on the edges before I even start rolling this out. When I cut in, I don't just cut in and leave it like this, and I'm going to show you how to cut in the proper way. But make sure you brush it out. Don't leave a streak right here, because if you do this and you let it sit and you come back to roll, you'll see a line right here where this thick paint is here and it's not here. After I put my brush in the paint, you slap the sides. If you have a can, you slap it on both sides. That loads the middle of the brush with paint and it goes a little further. I want to make sure I cover all that caulk and cover everything on that corner real well. So when I come back and trim it out with the white, I can cut in perfect. You don't want to spend all the time trying to cut this in perfect and then try to cut the other in perfect. So let this go over just a little bit, including your baseboards. A tiny bit over, don't get crazy and blow it all over your baseboards. And if you get a little bit over it, don't worry about it. Just make sure you don't have any thick spots on it, so when you come back over and paint your trim, you don't see a mark where that's thick. Make sure you always brush things out a little bit if it gets on something. And the trim, if I get a little bit on this wall trim like this, it's not going to kill it. I'll just make sure it's not thick. If I did get it on there, I'll brush it off and make it thin, so when I do cut over it, I cover it easy. Now, another thing is I make sure I get all around my receptacles and my lights, everything like that. I'm going to trim around, just hit the brush around it. That way when I come back over to roll it, I can blend it in. Same with my corners. In my corners, I hit both sides of the corners real well, because the roller is not going to get in there real close. So if you start rolling on one side and try to get it real close, you're going to have all kind of swirls on the other wall, or even scratch the wall from the end of the roller cage. So you just hit both sides of those and get as close as you can with the roller after. Again, if you're painting, do not get cheap stuff. Spend a couple dollars more and get a good roller. Also, what I'll do is take some tape and I'll roll it up backwards on my hand, and I'll rub that tape on here and it pulls all these little hairs off that might be sticking out. So, once I got that straight, I get my roller cage together and we'll start rolling. Once you have your roller loaded up, you see what I'm talking about with tracks? I like to do this in the pan. But if I have a good solid wall, if this isn't fresh paint on it, then I can do it on the wall like this to knock these tracks off. You don't want to gouge it, you just lightly push it like that. Now, I can just roll that out, and I'll put a little bit of pressure on here when I'm putting my heavy coat, okay? After you do that, if you push it too hard, you'll see a line right there. You don't want to do that. You push it hard enough to where you can get that paint out of it, but then you lightly roll it. Okay, you don't need to put much pressure on there then, and that makes sure you don't have any tracks. If you see any thin spots where you miss, that's called a holiday. Okay? You don't want holidays in there. You want to make sure you overlap and cover everything. If you don't feel comfortable with the paintbrush cutting in, then you can use painter's tape. It's more expensive, so what I suggest is if you want to try it out, get you a good brush, put your painter's tape on the wall here, and practice cutting in while you have your painter's tape. That way, you still get a good line, you peel your tape off, and you're learning a little bit more about how to paint. Because when you get to where you can cut in all over, it's so much faster than taping in everything and then coming back. It's also a lot cheaper. Earlier in the video I mentioned about holidays. This is a holiday. It's where you rolled or you're painted and you're missing little spots. You can see behind it where there's bare spots. So what I'll do is I'll take a brush, and normally if you just swipe this, you're going to see exactly where this is, where I touched it up. What I can do is just dab it. All I do is dab it. And it's the same way with cutting in. If you miss a little spot and you need to go touch it up, you can go and cut that little spot in and then just dab around it, and you'll make it blend with the roller. Okay, now we're going to cut in this baseboard. Remember, I take my brush, I put it in the can, and I'm going to slap it on the two sides. Now I have a little bit too much paint on here for cutting. I mentioned to you earlier, wipe the sides, get some of that off of it. Okay, now I'm going to start in this corner, just touch this, and then I'm going to get a little groove right here. Once I get in that groove, I just slide it down. When you're cutting down by the bottom of this baseboard, make sure you don't load up this brush. You don't want a lot of paint on here. You just want to be able to swipe over that and get enough to cover it. Because if you put too much paint on there and you pick this knife up, it's going to get on these fibers, and you don't want that. You want a nice clean look. If you have a different kind of blade, that's fine. You just want something thin that can go down all the way and protect you from getting paint on that carpet. Once you hit that bottom part, you pick it up, and I just keep a good sponge with me. I'll put it in a bucket every few minutes, wipe this off, and go to my next part. That's why the bigger the blade, the longer the blade, the faster this is going to go. But it does work. And detail is very important.